But poor old Gina.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Bible discussion. I hope that we're going to have a really good conversation this evening as we're going to be looking at the book of Genesis and thinking about exactly what beginning is it. Okay. Excuse me. So the word Genesis simply means beginnings, and it's easy to think of it just being the beginnings of humankind with creation. But there's more to it than that, as I've been indicating, and I hope you've been thinking. So before we get into that, let's have a prayer together. And David, can I ask you again to lead us in a prayer? Is that all right?
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Lord, we thank you that we're all in, and as we look at your word, help us to get fresh understanding of what it means to us. Pray for each member of this group and all the things they've been doing today. We pray that you'll help us be blessed this evening. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. What? Now, the book of Genesis is quite long, and we're going to do a bit of an overview of Genesis today, possibly even just an overview of the first half of the book. So we're not going into too much detail, but we have the opportunity of going into detail on another occasion. And so it's up to you if we do that and what you might want to look at. So I'll make a suggestion now. You might want to look at the life of Abraham or the life of Isaac and Jacob, and you might want to look at the flood in more detail. Any of those things we could do. Okay, so if you want to go into depth on any of the points, please let me know. What we're going to do is we're going to start by reading from chapter 6. So the book of Genesis, chapter 6, which is the account of Noah and the flood. So it's the chapter before the actual flood. So it's where God instructs Noah what he's to do. It also tells us why. Okay, so we're going to read that through. So if you've got a Bible and you're willing to take a turn in reading, I'd be grateful. There are 22 verses, so it would divide quite well into 3 readings. So if 3 people would like to have a go, we could start off with the first verse and read through to verse 6 or 7 or even to 8, but then somebody else carry on from there. So last week it was very good. People picked up on the readings every time quickly, except for on one occasion. So over to you, if you would share together with the reading. Who's going to start us off, please?
What was it? Chapter 6, what? Just verse 1 to 8, yeah.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
When the human race began, I'm reading from the Message. When the human race began to increase, with more and more daughters being born, the sons of God noticed that the daughters of men were beautiful. They looked them over and picked out wives for themselves. Honestly. Then God said, I'm not going to breathe life into men and women endlessly. Eventually they're going to die. From now on, they can expect a lifespan of 120 years. This was back in the days and also later when there were giants in the land. The giants came from the union of the sons of God and the daughters of men. These were the mighty men of ancient lore, famous ones. God saw that human evil was out of control. People thought evil, imagined evil, evil from morning to night. God was sorry that he had made the human race in the first place. It broke his heart. God said, I'll get rid of my ruined creation, make a clean sweep. People, animals, snakes and bugs, birds, the works. I'm sorry I made them. But Noah was different. God liked what he saw in Noah.
Somebody else, please continue.
These are the descendants of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw that the earth was corrupt, for all the flesh had corrupted its ways upon the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. Now I'm going to destroy them along with the earth. Make yourselves an ark of cypress wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits, its width, 50 cubits, and its height, 30 cubits.
Somebody
Make a
on?
Make a roof for it and finish the ark to within 18 inches of the top. Put a door in the side of the ark and make lower, middle, and upper decks. I'm going to bring flood waters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens. Every creature that has the breath of life in it. Everything on earth will perish, but I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark. You and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. You're to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. You are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and store it away as food for you and for them. Noah did everything just as God commanded him.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the readings. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll come back to that in a few moments and look at a number of things. If you want to know the dimensions of the ark, meanwhile, in things we're more used to, it's 135 meters long, so 3 times that in feet. So that would be about 300.
450. It's got in my Bible.
How much?
Yeah, in my Bible it's 400 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 high.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay. So what I want to do is to reflect on the purpose of what's the purpose of having Genesis in the Bible. Now, maybe that's a silly question. Maybe you think it's silly. Maybe it's talking about the beginning of humankind. And so we've got it there. So we know we're human and we see where we fit in. But is that all there is about it? Anybody want to suggest what it might have meant to Jewish people, why it's in their Bible? So it's in the Hebrew Bible, in the Hebrew scriptures, which we have as the Old Testament. Okay, so we've got it in our Bible in the 21st century, and they have it in their Hebrew scriptures, which are much older. But what was it there for? If it was inspired by God, why did he want it there? Anybody want to make a comment?
I think it's the key. The key is chapter 5, because that is where you get your first genealogy. Actually, you might have been leaving, but yeah, genealogy, and it's tracing back the human race to the Godhead, and the God, man was made in the image of God, and this is tracing that right back to the big. So chapter 5 is headed in the NIV that I've got from Adam to Noah. So Noah is the first stop in an Odyssey, where you start off with a perfect human, and then they fall, and then Cain introduces murder into it. And as you read it, it's not just individuals, but they begin to grow and become nations. But for the Jews, there was a significant genealogy that went back they could trace themselves back to Adam and through Noah.
Okay.
To me, that's why it's.
Thank you, David. I'm happy with that.
Can I just finish what I'm saying, Barry? I think that shows that it demonstrates that the faith in God is the original faith, and all the other religions around them. But even by the time of Noah, there would have been other faiths going on around.
Okay.
And they would have. But the Jews were claiming that theirs is the one God, the original God. It's not to sort of deceive us like all the rest.
Okay, thank you. That's a really good help. In chapter 5, there's a repeated phrase. Does anybody know what the repeated phrase is?
And then he died.
Yeah, and he died. Okay. So that's quite an important aspect about
And he became the father of.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So that's part of the genealogy, just tracing people back through the father's line. And there's some important people and some lesser important people there. But David's point about it being able to, for Jews to be able to trace their beginning is important. Okay. Anybody else want to suggest anything? So the bit about "and he died" is to emphasize mortality, isn't it?
Mm.
Right. If nobody else wants to come up.
Also,
Yes, go Fiona.
the chapter 6 leads on to chapter 7, and I think it's in chapter 7. No, it must be is leading up to the first covenant, the first agreement between God and people.
Okay.
And so you can't tell of the agreement between God and people if you don't say why it happened.
Okay. That actually leads us to quite a significant thing. And in my communications with you, I have suggested something about the sense of tributaries that run from Genesis all the way through Scripture. So I think that one of the things about Genesis is the beginnings. It shows us the beginnings of biblical truths and doctrines. There are things that we learn there. Now, Fiona's already mentioned the concept of covenants, and covenant theology is an important thing. The word Old Testament really means Old Covenant and refers to the covenant God made, possibly with Abraham, but certainly with Moses. So that's a covenant. And we thought about the forming of the covenant and the sacrifice and the shedding of blood that marked it as well. So that was announced as a covenant as well. But the first covenant was the covenant with Moses, with Noah, and so that's quite an important thing. I think it's an unconditional covenant in Noah, but all the others are conditional, except the new covenant, which was instituted in the upper room when Jesus took bread and wine, shared it with his disciples, and said, "This is the covenant in my blood, which is shed for the remission of sins." So we have got a new covenant, which the letter to the Hebrews stresses is a better covenant. The first covenant had weaknesses in that it depended upon humans' ability to correctly live and walk with God and keep his rules. And of course, that's never happened. So it had a built-in weakness, which the new covenant does not have, because it does not depend on our actions to be righteous, have righteous standing with God. We have imputed righteousness given to us by God, because it is the righteousness of Christ. And that's how God sees you and me. When we turn and put our trust in Jesus, sins are forgiven and we are accepted and received, and we are fully saved. So think about how rivers start off in little tributaries, little streams, and get wider and wider as they pass through. Can you think of any biblical truths or biblical doctrines that you think have some sort of beginning in the book of Genesis, besides covenant theology?
He's the creator.
Okay, so creation is important.
The chosen people.
Something we could link with that. Fiona, did you say something?
The chosen people.
Okay, yeah, okay. Chosen people is important. So actually, the doctrine of election is also important, and then the church is important. Okay, so all of those things have their beginnings in Genesis.
How come the church has its beginning in Genesis?
Well, if you
I want to
understand the
challenge you on
church,
that.
if you understand the church as God's covenant people, you can think of it that way, David. If
Yeah.
you think of it as God's elect, which is how one of the apostles addresses a church, God's chosen people. So there is this sense of God choosing people as we go through Genesis, particularly the latter half where we are introduced to Abraham, and we get the chosen people, the historic chosen people of God, which again the New Testament calls the church in the wilderness. So we get church there as well, but that comes in Exodus. What other things?
Justified by faith and not works.
Yes.
Right, okay, we certainly get that through Abraham, justification by faith. We're doing quite well. Can we find any others?
That God can do miracles.
Mm.
Where are you thinking about, Fiona?
Well, there's the birth of Isaac. There's the creation of the world.
Okay,
There.
It's a big one.
so a miraculous God, okay.
Temptation.
Okay, we have temptation. What usually follows temptation?
Sin.
Sin.
Sin, okay. And we've got universal sin in Genesis, okay. And then we've got, now what's the term for sin being passed on from Adam into us? I can't remember what it's called. We have that principle as well, so that sin is part of human nature.
Original sin.
Thank you, David. Original sin. There's another really important doctrine we haven't mentioned, which should stand out like a sore thumb. It's so obvious that we haven't mentioned it. Nobody going to come up with it.
What?
What about salvation?
Oh.
Okay, so we have salvation as well. So all of these vital spiritual doctrines, biblical theology, trace it all the way back to the book of Genesis. So it's the beginning of quite a lot of important truths that then gets expanded and developed. And of course, the thing about Genesis, and the important thing for us today as we're talking about it in fairly general terms, is where it fits in to a story. It is, of course, the beginning of a story. And the story is about Jesus. The story is about redemption. The story is about forgiveness. There's another theological issue in Genesis. We get substitutionary atonement. Anybody think where there's a little hint of substitutionary atonement in the book of Genesis?
With Abraham and his son Isaac, and then the ram was substituted as a sacrifice instead of the boy.
Well done, Tricia. So that's it. Okay, so the story is about Jesus, and we get to meet Jesus, although we kind of get little hints of meeting him beforehand, possibly meeting Jesus in even in Genesis, in what are called theophanies, which are human beings that represented God, may have been God, but in human form. And so when we get three people that go to the home of Abraham, it's believed that that included a theophany, so that might have been Jesus there. We meet Jesus 3/4 of the way through what we call the Bible, and so we meet in the
Barry,
gospel.
I don't really see that anymore. I don't see that Jesus, when Jesus came, they understood Jesus in the way of the, we were looking at Hebrews in this particular way, but we've started to place Jesus in places where I don't think they originally intended him to be, like the theophanies. I think the theophanies was God in human form, but it wasn't the sense that that Jesus was that was God as a savior coming in. It was just God as a commander. And okay, we've got the Abraham story, but with Isaac. But again, I think we've read the salvation story and we've looked back and say that's like Abraham. And like in Romans, Abraham's given an example of faith. But if we look at Noah, in a way, Noah was chosen not because of God's righteousness, but because of his righteousness. Because I do not believe that Noah. Well, what's he said about Noah here? I've gone on to other chapters, and I think sometimes we try to squeeze Jesus in where he doesn't actually appear, because people in the Old Testament did not believe in Jesus. They believed in a Messiah that would be a warrior king.
Okay. Now, I don't mind the point you're making, and I don't mind anybody contradicting me at any time. But the point about, let's just stay with the theophany for a moment, because theophanies is only an idea. It's an idea.
Yeah.
Maybe God was present, Jesus was present, and obscure but present. Now there were three people.
Is that what it means? I don't know what I can't even say the word. What does that mean?
Theophany.
Yes.
Theophany. Yeah.
What does that mean?
A theophany is a human being,
Yes.
or it's God who is appearing within a human form. Okay, so hold tight for it for a moment. Okay, there were three people that called at the house of Abraham, and Abraham sacrificed and worshipped. And so there's a query about, okay, so who is he worshipping and so on. So there is a question about it. So theologians have suggested, and theologians aren't always right, we don't always agree about everything, but the concept of theophanies does exist. So there are people who've been projecting this concept in the past. David is perfectly okay to say he doesn't believe that God was in any of these people who, through the scriptures, represented God. I mean, for instance, we were talking about Melchizedek. He's another one that's a bit of a strange, we don't fully understand who he was, but he has no beginning and no end. Now, that's not human. That's not a human characteristic. And Abraham doesn't exactly worship Melchizedek, but he gives him tithes. So he contributes and gives a thank offering to Melchizedek. So we get these strange things. So it's not an important point. If it was an important point of teaching, it would be said clearly and plainly, but it's not. And what I'm suggesting about the book of Genesis is that we have hints. They are no more than hints. Now, it's fine for David to say, but that's reading back from the New Testament account of the life of Jesus It's reading back into Genesis things that are not clearly stated there. That's perfectly right. Okay. But nonetheless, this book, which is about beginnings, contains much more than the story of human creation and the creation of the world. It's got much more in it than that. And when Jesus met the two disciples on the road to Emmaus, and he wanted to explain who the Messiah was, he went right back to the beginning, went right back into the book of Genesis, right back to the books of Moses. He started there and he went all the way through, pointing it out. So what I'm suggesting, and you can accept it or not, I don't mind, but what I'm suggesting is that the heart of the message of the Bible is the life of Jesus, his death on the cross, and his resurrection and ascension. This is the heart of the story of the Bible. Everything else is almost ancillary to it. Okay?
Always thought that.
It's not totally nothing to do with it. It gives us a total picture. So in the prophets, we get prophecy concerning the Messiah. In the Psalms, there are references to the Messiah. In the books of the law, we get references to the messianic promise again, which we will look at this evening. So all of these things can be traced back into the book of Genesis.
Yeah, because God put them there, didn't he?
Say again, Chrissy.
Well, God put them there. There was a black hole, and he created the world, and then he's created those people for a purpose. And now we can probably look back at what we think the purpose was. But I mean, I can't understand. Yeah, you know.
That's the helpful, Chrissy, because I was saying, what's the purpose? Why is it there? What is the purpose of it? What
God wanted it there.
What did Jews have to learn from it? And sorry?
Yeah, God put it there for the purpose of that they'd learn from it, that you know, it can start again.
Okay.
You know,
So we haven't said in the list of truths, there's the issue of accountability and sovereignty of God. All of that can be seen. All of these things can be seen in the book of Genesis. If, like David, you decide that, I think I'm saying right, David, you're saying that they don't necessarily, they're not necessarily there as pointers, as hints, then that's okay. But I would say there are things that are quite clear and plain, as we'll think about tonight.
I think what I'm trying to say, I'm going to say it now because I'll have to go in 10 minutes, is that God's Spirit has been in work through since the creation of the world, but through but the understanding of what God is doing has grown, and often the themes of grace, the themes of redemption, as you said, are seen very much in the Old Testament. And the other thing I've noticed about Genesis is that it's almost two books, because you've got the first 11 chapters where God is seen as the God of the whole world.
Yeah.
But then from chapter 12, it's focused down on Abraham. But there are still other people like Melchizedek that are still worshipping the big God. And I think the big theme, the big theme of what the Jews believed is that God was their God exclusively, but he was the God of the whole world. He was the creator of the whole world.
Yeah.
And when you start to look at particularly the genealogies, you see all the other nations as well as the Jewish nations appearing and coming out of this one seed of Adam and Eve and the family. And that's what they believe, that everybody was ascended from Adam and Eve, the first, and they were made in the image of God. And that image of God has passed through the whole of creation. But then God chose the nation of Israel to be an example of how we of what what God was like, the good news. I was trying to avoid the word gospel, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
The nation of Israel was chosen to show people what it was like to be in the kingdom of God, the faithfulness of God.
Yeah.
And I'm now starting to use New Testament phrases, so these first 11 chapters say that God is the one is in charge of all the world. But then we start to focus on Abraham, not
And his
because
family, yeah.
he's particularly chosen, because his father was also chosen, but then decided to stay in Haran, whereas Abraham went and then his faith really sort of grew to the nation of Israel, and his descendants were like 1,000 stars. Or even
Yeah.
1,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense, or am I confusing people?
No, it makes perfect sense.
Because I
we're going
read a book called The New Kind of Christianity, and the author there, Brian McCann, says many Christians read the Bible backwards. They start with Jesus, and then they try and find places where gospel, and then they ignore bits that don't really, bits like the Leviticus and things like that don't really fit into the modern New Testament story. But those themes that Jesus taught are within the Old Testament and even in Genesis from the very beginning, but they manifest themselves in different ways according to the culture of the people.
Okay. What we're going to do is have a look at a video in a moment. And it picks up on what David has said about the first 11 chapters of Genesis being about God and the world, and then the remainder is being God and Abraham and his descendants. And so the issue that I think that David probably does believe, and I certainly believe, is that God isn't confused. He's not just drifting and going with the times, but he's got a plan and a purpose that he's been working on from the beginning of creation. So God's plan and purpose incorporated the choosing of the people of Israel. So that's Abraham and his descendants, that they were his chosen people. And he gave a covenant. He had a covenant for them. Covenant which they had an inability to keep, and so it became worthless. So God gave a new covenant that was set entirely in the heart of God. The price was paid by Jesus on the cross. It was not necessary for humans to be obedient to law in order to gain righteousness, because that's not possible to be righteous through the keeping of the law. Bible tells us that. But righteousness comes as a gift of God through faith. So the issue is whether, when you look back into Genesis, and if you look back as part of the whole picture and say, okay, why is it there? Where does it fit in to the story, the whole story of salvation? Then it's up to you whether you want to say all these little hints that are there are significant because they're pointing us somehow, giving a hint of something yet to come, or whether you want to say, no, that's human manufacture, which is the point that David is making from a book. Okay, so if you're ready.
I wouldn't say it was people were inspired by their culture. Through their culture, they had an experience of God, and that led them to be inspired. This is the message of God to our culture to now, but there is a eternal message throughout it all, eternal themes. And I was going to say something else that I wanted to finish with, and I've forgotten what it was now. Sorry. What point made everything clear?
It's not coming. It has been, we've made a clear point, David. It's fine. And
yeah,
the issue that I want us to think about is, why do you think Genesis is there? What is it that we're meant to learn from it.
God put it there. I'm sorry, but that's all it means to me, is God put it.
What? Say again, Chrissy.
Yeah, so I've got I'm getting upset face very soon. And, you know, I mean, I'm looking at my Bible now and it's telling you all what's happened from the beginning and what culture has happened. And it says, nation undated, no undated. We get 2500 BC. The Egyptians discover papyrus and ink and start to learn to write. So all the time the culture is changing and improving, and and then the Egyptians, and then the chieftains, and the horses are domesticated, and then Abraham is born in 2166, and God planned that. So God has planned all this.
Okay.
So, you know, all right, he's given us these hints, but probably not at the time when we're looking back. So when I put it all out like that, you know, well, God was there, wasn't he? And he's still there. And he made the world. He created it, and then he influenced Noah and sort of thing. So, and because we've got all these stories, we're now looking back and saying, you know, we're saying that God did that. There wasn't anybody else that's doing it. He's completely in control, isn't he? And it's not till later on that he gives his son down because we made such a mess, that he's given his son. And that's where you get your faith from, you know, or, you know, sort of thing.
Okay. I suppose that the significant thing, Chrissy, is whether we think of the Bible as a whole story or whether we think of it as 66 separate stories, most of which has got nothing to do with the rest. If you think about it as being part of a whole story that has God at its heart, a sovereign creator God, who when he started knew what he was doing, okay,
he must have.
then that's fine. Let's have a look at the video. David, if you go, can I thank you for your contribution this evening? Okay.
Yes.
All right, what's the time now? I think I do need to go. Okay.
Okay.
So having disrupted everything, I'm going to go.
No, you haven't.
No, it was really interesting.
Good.
Bye there.
Okay.
Bye.
Right.
Bye, darling. Bye, Dave.
Bye, David. Right. Hopefully you will get a decent picture. Okay. If it's not large enough or not loud enough, will you shout and let me know? I'll stop part way through and just check anyway. Right. This is called the Bible Project, and there are a number of videos online, and someone commented about this to me the other day, that it said it's black and white and not in color, and then they said also he talks very quickly, which he does. And hopefully this is 7 minutes. Okay, just 7 minutes. It's not long.
The Book of Genesis. In the first video, we saw how chapters 1 through 11 set up the basic storyline of the Bible.
Sorry, I want to be sure that I'm on the right one.
We've used these before, haven't we?
I'm on the wrong one, so I'm on the second half, not the first half. Just bear with me, please. Right, let's start again. It was a bit quiet. Could you hear all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Book of Genesis. It's the first book of the Bible, and its storyline divides into two main parts. There's chapters 1 through 11, which tell the story of God and the whole world. And then there's chapters 12 through 50, which zoom in and tell the story of God and just one man, Abraham, and then his family. And these two parts are connected by a hinge story at the beginning of chapter 12. And this design, it gives us a clue to how to understand the message of the book as a whole and how it introduces the story of the whole Bible. So the book begins with God taking the disorder and the darkness described in the second sentence of the Bible, and God brings out of it order and beauty and goodness. He makes a world where life can flourish. And God makes these creatures called humans, or Adam in Hebrew. He makes them in his image, which has to do with their role and purpose in God's world. So the humans are made to be reflections of God's character out into the world, and they're appointed as God's representatives to rule his world on his behalf, which in context means to harness all of its potential, to care for it, and make it a place where even more life can flourish. God blesses the humans. It's a key word in this book. And he gives them a garden. It's like a place from which they begin starting to build this new world. Now, the key is that the humans have a choice about how they're going to go about building this world. And that's represented by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Up till now, God has provided and defined what is good and what is not good. But now God is giving the humans the dignity and the freedom of a choice. Are they going to trust God's definition of good and evil, or are they going to seize autonomy and define good and evil for themselves? And the stakes are really high. To rebel against God is to embrace death, because you're turning away from the giver of life himself. This is represented by the tree of life. And so in chapter 3, a mysterious figure, a snake, enters into the story. The snake's given no introduction other than it's a creature that God made. And it becomes clear that it's a creature in rebellion against God, and it wants to lead the humans into rebellion and their death. The snake tells a different story about the tree and the choice. It says that seizing the knowledge of good and evil are not going to bring death, that it's actually the way to life and becoming like God themselves. Now, the irony of this is tragic, because we know the humans, they're already like God. They were made to reflect God's image. But instead of trusting God, the humans seize autonomy, they take the knowledge of good and evil for themselves, and in an instant, the whole story spirals out of control. The first casualty is human relationships. The man and the woman, they suddenly realize how vulnerable they are. Now, they can't even trust each other. And so they make clothes and they hide their bodies from one another. The second casualty is that intimacy between God and the humans is lost. So they go and run and hide from God, and then when God finds them, they start this game of blame shifting about who rebelled first. Now, right here, the story stops, and there's a series of short poems where God declares to the snake and then to the humans the tragic consequences of their actions. God first tells the snake that despite its apparent victory, it is destined for defeat, to eat dust. God promises that one day a seed, or a descendant, will come from the woman who's going to deliver a lethal strike to the snake's head, which sounds like great news, but this victory is going to come with a cost, because the snake, too, will deliver a lethal strike to the descendant's heel as it's being crushed. It's a very mysterious promise of this wounded victor. But in the flow of the story so far, you see this is an act of God's grace. The humans, they've just rebelled, and what does God do? He promises to rescue them. But this doesn't erase the consequences of the humans' decision. So God informs them that now every aspect of their life together, at home and out in the field, it's going to be fraught with grief and pain because of the rebellion, all leading to their death. From here, the story then spirals downward. Chapters 3 through 11, they trace the widening ripple effect of the rebellion and of human relationships fracturing at every level. So there's a story about two brothers, Cain and Abel. Cain's so jealous of his brother that he wants to murder him. And God warns him not to give in to the temptation, but he does anyway. He murders him in the field. So Cain then goes on to build a city where violence and oppression reign. And this is all epitomized in the story of Lamech. He's the first man in the Bible to have more than one wife. He's accumulating them like property. And then he goes on to sing a short song about how he's more violent and vengeful than Cain ever was. After this, we get an odd story about the sons of God, which could refer to evil angelic beings, or it could refer to ancient kings who claimed that they descended from the gods. And like Lamech, they acquire as many wives as they wanted, and they produce the Nephilim, these great warriors of old. Whichever view is right, the point is that humans are building kingdoms that fill God's world with violence and even more corruption. In response, we're told that God is broken with grief. Humanity is ruining his good world, and they're ruining each other. And so out of a passion to protect the goodness of his world, he washes it clean of humanity's evil with a great flood. But he protects one blameless human, Noah, and his family, and he commissions him as a new Adam. He repeats the divine blessing and commissions him to go out into the world. And so our hopes are really high, but then Noah fails too, and also in a garden. He goes and he plants a vineyard, and he gets drunk out of his mind. And then one of his sons, Ham, does something shameful to his father in the tent. And so here we have our new Adam, naked and ashamed, just like the first, and the downward spiral begins again. It all leads to the foundation of the city of Babylon. The people of ancient Mesopotamia, they come together around this new technology they have, the brick. And they can make cities and towers bigger and faster than anybody's ever done before. And they want to build a new kind of tower that will reach up to the gods, and they will make a great name for themselves. It's an image of human rebellion and arrogance. It's the garden rebellion now writ large. And so God humbles their pride and scatters them. Now, this is a diverse group of stories, but you can see they're all exploring the same basic point. God keeps giving humans the chance to do the right thing with his world, and humans keep ruining it. These stories are making a claim that we live in a good world that we have turned bad, that we've all chosen to define good and evil for ourselves, and so we all contribute to this world of broken relationships, leading to conflict and violence and ultimately death. But there's hope. God promised that one day a descendant would come, the wounded victor who will defeat evil at its source. And so despite humanity's evil, God is determined to bless and rescue his world. And so the big question, of course, is what is God going to do? And the next story, The Hinge, offers the answer. But for now, that's what Genesis 1 through 11 is all about.
Right, hold on while I just stop presenting. Okay, so I hope that that was helpful. It's quite clever the way they illustrate what they're teaching by doing the drawings, and hopefully that keeps your focus, because I know some have difficulty staying focused and tend to want to drop off to sleep. So hopefully that kept your focus, and you might like to have a conversation now about what was in it that maybe spoke to you. Was there anything that stood out, and maybe something you hadn't reflected on before that you reflect on? But basically the story is that God created a perfect world that human beings have corrupted because of our sinful nature, but that God again and again gave chances of forgiveness and mercy, but people didn't take it. One illustration of that is with Cain and Abel, where Cain is determined to kill his brother, and God says, you mustn't do that. And he said, look, sin is crouching at your door. Either you resist it and overcome it, or it's going to overcome you. And he chose to be overcome by the sin. So very interesting how all of these different things sort of fit together. But in the presentation that we have from the Bible Project, we have it presented to us as part of this story that God was unfolding from the very beginning. So when you read a book, you start at the beginning, and maybe you don't understand what it's about. It's about two cities and two times and so on. But what's that got to do with anything? And it's not until you get to the last chapter that you really understand what the story is about. And that's what evangelical theologians have been particularly emphasizing, not exclusively evangelical ones, but it's the heart of the thing is that it's one big story, one big message that centers around the gift of Jesus and his coming into this world and dying for us on the cross. So comments? Anybody want to argue with anything that was in the film, or anything that was in the film that stood out to you? Jean, are you wanting to give something? No.
We've lost her, haven't we? Voice is gone.
No, she's muted herself.
Muted, Jean. Oh, she's gone.
She's gone.
I think
Oh, she said she'd go. It sort of turns her off halfway through. It happens every week, bless her.
Mm.
Yeah, she's getting fed up with it, actually. She was all right on the old
Yeah.
platform, but not this one.
Yeah.
I don't think the platform really makes a difference.
Oh, I see.
In actual fact, we've said that the pictures and the sound are better with Meet than they were with Zoom, but there isn't much difference.
Mm.
The problem relates to what we're using, the computer, the tablet or laptop that we're using, and the internet connection we have. That's where the problems lie.
Mm.
Anybody want to comment about the film? You can say you hated it if you like. I don't mind what you say. I'd rather you said something and we had a conversation.
What I thought was interesting was from the very beginning, our relationship with God and now Jesus, as I understand it and I'm becoming to understand, our faith is blessed by God when we're obedient to him. And things move along between us very smoothly and openly. And Jesus showed that, even though he had severe doubts in the Garden of Gethsemane, yet he said, your will, not mine, and showed complete obedience. And there in Genesis, we show what happens in the very early stages where Adam and Eve were disobedient to God. Because people focus on the fact that, always seem to focus on the fact that Eve misled Adam. He had free will. He could have said, no, I don't want to eat the fruit of that tree. God said no. Could have been obedient to him. But it wasn't so much a temptation with Eve. Satan said, you will know as much as God. She wanted to be like God. She couldn't be obedient to him and not eat the fruit because she wanted to know as much as him and almost challenge him. So she was completely disobedient to what he had asked them to do. And from then on, we see what happened as a result.
Okay. Couple of things out of what you said. First, on the issue of obedience. Now, obedience to God's purposes is important. And verse 22 of the chapter that we read finished with these words: Noah did everything as God commanded him. It also contains a record that Noah was living in a good relationship with God. Now, that's quite important. I can't at the moment just remember where it is, but I think in the chapter mention it there somewhere. But it does mention in the book of Genesis several times where it talks about people who were living pleasing to God. And they weren't rules and regulations. The only rule and regulation in the creation story was that they were not to eat of the tree with the knowledge of good and evil. And that's what they broke. And they broke it because they saw it was an attractive fruit, that if they took it, they would be like God, they'd be equal to God, and that it was delicious. So all of those things, there's lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, which has been our downfall all the way along. It's those three things that cause us problems. So that's one of the key things that come out of it. Anybody else want to comment?
It's in the good news they put in chapter 6, they put verses 9 and 10 together, and they talk about the family of Noah, and then they say he lived in fellowship with God. So they're not, it doesn't say what he did or what he didn't do, but they say that he was in fellowship with God. I thought that's interesting, isn't it? They didn't say that he did lots of good things or that he didn't do lots of evil things. They said he was in fellowship with God. I think that's very interesting. But then it goes on to say, but everyone else was evil in God's sight.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, that's the thing that has to come first is the fellowship with God, isn't it?
Yes.
And
Yeah. In the NIV, Dot, it says he walked faithfully with God. Same thing.
It's to see what we've done, man.
The boat as well, didn't he? Noah had the faith to build the boat because he was so close to God and doing what God said to do.
In the previous chapter, where we noted it kept saying, and he died, and he died, and he died, only one person that's in that list didn't die. That was Enoch, because he walked with God, and God took him. So he went to be with God. So that's, again, an interesting reflection on people who choose to walk faithfully. But it's a choice.
Yes.
I don't know. Yes, I think just God knows everything, and it's for a purpose.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm following along here because it's marvellous. This thing tells you all what's developed. In the 68 AD, it says Romans destroy a Jewish religious commune at Juran. Before the Juran community is captured, they hide the library of Bible manuscripts in a cave by the Dead Sea, and it's discovered in 1948. So God is in charge of all of that, taking care of that, and then enabling people to find it all those years later. Because I can remember when they found, well, I couldn't remember because I was only born in 1947, but I've heard people talking about it afterwards and saying it brought a lot of people to faith because, you know, they sort of realised that was all going on beforehand. So, you know, I just see God as in charge of the whole thing, and whether we follow him or not, you know, there's consequences and everything.
Yes. We could say he has the first word and he'll have the last.
Yes, certainly will.
So that's great. Can I come back on what Tricia said? Because she used the story of Jesus in Gethsemane to illustrate the point she was saying. And she reminded us that Jesus said, not my will, but yours be done.
Yeah.
So he chose to be obedient. But what was he being obedient to?
Death on a cross.
Death on a cross.
Okay, but why was that necessary? Why was that not part of the plan that God had indicated when he said to the snake, he said, you will bruise his heel, he will bruise your head. So he's given a death blow, but he bruises. So the Savior is a wounded Savior. So that's pointing, I believe, points to the cross. So I believe that is possibly the first indication we get of the messianic salvation plan. It goes right back to the beginning when God said to Satan, to the snake, that he was going to suffer a death blow eventually, and one of Eve's descendants was going to be the one who would do it. Not God from heaven, but God born in Bethlehem.
Yeah. He conquered sin on the cross. And that was indicated, as you say, in the very first chapters of Genesis.
Yes.
It's God's son born in Bethlehem, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's difficult
because, you know, because the world is so corrupt, and that's the new creation, isn't it? That's what we all believe and know now.
Yes. But of course, with
how we
Jesus,
met, would they?
he's,
You know,
Jesus is both fully God and fully human. So he had to be fully human or he couldn't die. He had to be fully divine so that he could conquer death.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Does anybody not like the video?
oh, that was fine.
Okay. Part 2 takes us to the second half of the book of Genesis, to the story of Abraham. So David was talking about how the book divides into 2, and that's what we're picking up. We're going to be looking at the second half, which is how God reveals his plan of salvation through Abraham, through the Jews, through all of that, so that we have, for us, the great lesson of Abraham is salvation by faith. That's the great lesson for Christian doctrine, salvation by faith. So that's important. So we're going to go back to Genesis next week, God willing, and watch the video. It lasts much the same time, so it's about 8 minutes at the most, and it will cover the second half, and we can talk about it then. And we'll start by discussing one of the chapters and anything that we can gain out of that as well. So we'll do that as well. So plenty of discussion, but also, I hope, a helpful video to watch.
Yes.
As well. Okay, just to remind you that the name of the videos is, if you want to look, they're called Bible Project.